We take one last look at the personnel matchups between the Atlanta Falcons and the Miami Dolphins ahead of their Week 8 contest here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. We are doing a few things here today on the show. We're getting you ready. Final kind of drive-through of Falcons personnel challenges for the Dolphins to have on their P's and Q's and stand on business with and try to get a win, right? That's part of prepping every week for the game is figuring out what do we do to win on Sunday with the opponent at hand. And we'll do that. I want to talk about some mounting depth issues with this football team, including a player that if I told you probably 12 months ago from today, I said, hey, we're not going to have this player on Sunday. You'd say, hey, good. And I'd say, yeah, I don't know about that, but okay, whatever. But this year, it is a definitive loss for Miami for how this player has played and what the Dolphins have as alternatives for this player. And then we are going to peek an eye to the college football slate. Look, it's October 24th. We got like 5 weeks of college football left in the regular season. It's going to be gone before we know it. And we are at that juncture as a football team where we need to start watching some of these games with an eye towards the Miami Dolphins and the future of the Miami Dolphins and who might be available and what kind of assets the Dolphins are going to have to work with. And we're not going to go full NFL draft, but on Fridays for the rest of college football season, yeah, I'm going to spend 6-8 minutes talking about some of the games ahead and what we need to know. So let's start with this attrition that the Dolphins are facing in the tight end room, where Darren Waller was placed on injured reserve earlier this week, and the team moved Greg Dulcich up to an active roster spot. And I said, hey, it's a black cloud meets silver lining, silver lining. I think Greg Dulcich, if he could stay healthy, knock on wood, could be kind of like an interesting flyer for a guy who could maybe have some longevity on your roster, but he's got to get on the field and prove that. Excited to see what that looks like. And then Mike McDaniel went up on the podium today for his weekly Friday presser and was asked if Julian Hill was going to play on Sunday against the Falcons, and his answer was pretty much no. So it is very important to delineate your Y tight end versus your F tight end in this regard. The Dolphins do not have another Y tight end on the roster. Greg Dulcich is more of a receiving tight end than he's a blocking tight end. Tanner Conner is a college wide receiver. He is not a blocking player at all in any capacity. Those are the other two guys on the 53. If Julian Hill is down, Alec Ingold's a fullback. Alec Ingold is significantly better fitting blocks from the backfield angles that he is able to fit blocks with as compared to being up on the line of scrimmage. You saw it when they just split him out wide and tried to run one of those perimeter bubbles and get the ball quick out onto the perimeter. Having to be in a static alignment in a split stance off the ball or on the ball and attack blocks in space is a little different than being in the backfield and the ball or the defenders kind of wrapping and fitting to you because they're mirroring you and trying to fit, and then collisions that take place in the hole. Alec's excellent at that. But Alec, put your hand in the dirt and be our front side blocker. That's not really where Alec wins. So the Dolphins right now do not have another option on the active 53. Now they have two names that could get elevated, and I'm interested to see if they indeed do one of these. But it's going to make it even harder. Like your offensive, it's been such a moving target already offensively for like nailing down your issues. So to find out that Julian Hill, who's a player who has not been penalized at all this year, who has taken a step forward as a blocker this year, has taken a step forward as a low yield, low return on investment, but underneath safety valve in the passing game. I think he's been one of the few players who has taken the step forward in his trajectory as a player in development. I think he can be a role player as a long-term, like a tight end too, as a blocker. The problem is he's more often than not kind of called upon to be the featured player in the tight end room. So I think he's kind of miscast with what else you have. And then Darren Waller maybe fixed that, but that was for a few weeks. And now this 22 personnel stuff we've been gassing up for the last month is up in smoke already. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. So you have Hayden Rusi as a second-year undrafted free agent on the practice squad, and they signed Chris Myrick, who's familiar, has spent some time in Miami before as a potential practice squad elevation as well. I suspect we're going to get one of them because I don't think we can roll with Greg Dulcich and Tanner Connor with Alec Ingold and say, hey, we're good to go. We're good to roll at blocking with the blocking options in that room. That's an essential piece of the offense, right? It was one of the questions when I went down to training camp in 2024. I asked Mike McDaniel about the versatility of those guys. They said, you could look at the versatility of that room, turn the page. It's the versatility of your offense. This is not a versatile group anymore because it's very skill specific players. The top two options are out of the picture and nobody's a good inline player because they have receiving profiles, but they're more of developmental receiving profiles. So that's the challenge for Miami now that I think really compounds what they are aspiring to figure out for offensive stability purposes. It's another Jenga block that you've pulled out, right? And this thing was already really shaky week over week, inconsistent on where if there's shortcomings here, shortcomings there. Man, we did not need that extra Jenga block pulled out of the base of this thing. But it feels like that's what we have this week against Atlanta. It is a defense that's not really big. So they're a smaller front, but they are fast. And how do you take advantage of that? I think a guy like Julian Hill could have been very helpful for Miami in that regard on the edges. I'm interested to see what buttons they push to try to resolve those challenges, right? Going to look at some more personnel from Atlanta, matchups that I think are defining matchups for this contest, and then we're going to get into some of the college football slate at the end. That's next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is in full swing. FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, you can, as a new customer in FanDuel, bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you win, pick a bet, put down $5. If it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app, whether that's parlays, player lines, game totals, live lines during the games, you name it. Makes watching football that much more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action for yourself. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better, especially because the Dolphins aren't giving us a ton to get excited about on Sundays for themselves. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app today to go ahead and get started for your shot at $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're a business owner, here's the sad truth. SaaS promised to make your work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS, that's SAD, software as a disservice. And that's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance, all in one place. They've designed millions of businesses and help them replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. By uniting your employees, teams, and departments in one system, Rippling removes the bottlenecks, busy work, and silos that your software created. Everything from onboarding to payroll to IT runs automatically and perfectly in sync. And right now, you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/LockedOnNFL. That's RIPPLING.com/LockedOnNFL. Rippling.com/LockedOnNFL for 6 months free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right. The Falcons. The Falcons are a team that performs very well at home and performs very poorly on the road. They're 3-3 this season. They're 7th in yards offensively, but 28th in points offensively. So they move the ball. They've got, obviously, Bijan Robinson. They've got Drake London. They've got Kyle Pitts. Those are all top 10 picks. So the physical talent is evident here. And Michael Penix at the quarterback position sounds like he's going to be questionable for this game. If it's not Penix, it will be Kirk Cousins, which I think would be, I don't want to say a great equalizer for the Dolphins defense, which is, I think, trending in the right direction. It's just how much progress can they make and how fast. I did a film study, a coach's film study over on Touchdown Miami, and had some observations about some of the young guys and how they're fitting the run. And I think they're trending in a way that suggests they will continue to get better, barring injuries, throughout the course of the season. Now, there's going to be some games they roll into, and they're just going to be outgunned from a matchup standpoint and a personnel standpoint because they went with a lot of youth and a lot of foundational players, and it's an incomplete build right now on that side of the ball. Atlanta, from a skill group perspective, has the potential to be one of those groups. But if it's Kirk Cousins, well, Kirk really did not have a lot of gas on the ball last year. I think he's pretty limited from a ability to drive the ball at this stage standpoint, especially versus Penix. So Penix has more access to more of the field. But Kirk is, I think, a much more efficient and accurate passer, but he also doesn't have the athleticism that Penix has. So there's some gives and takes there that I do think the quarterback availability for Atlanta, I think, significantly does change the profile of how their offense plays against Miami and how much they are really able to attract attention to Bijan Robinson. Mike McDaniel on Friday said if they're going to bottle him up as best as possible, that's going to come courtesy of pack mentality. That only, I think, is achievable if you are able to play the Falcons' passing game through a bottleneck. So Atlanta in 3 games at home this season has beat the Bills by 10 points and had 443 yards of offense and limited the Bills to 291 yards of offense. They beat the Commanders 34-27 and had 435 yards of offense and held the Commanders to 294 yards of offense. And then the Buccaneers beat on a final 2-minute comeback by Baker Mayfield. The Buccaneers beat the Falcons in week 1 in Atlanta 23-20. But the Bucs only had 260 yards of offense. The Falcons only have 1 game all season in which they have given up more than 294 yards of offense to opposing offenses. And that's bad news for Miami because some of this is time of possession related, but Miami's really not moving the ball from a yards perspective, right? I mean, Miami's currently sitting here in yards. They're 27th in yards offensively. It's 5.2 yards per play, so it's not an egregiously low yards per play amount, and that's boosted up because they're averaging a very healthy amount on the ground in the run game. But we just got done talking about how the tight end position is another loss in that regard with Julian Hill and his availability. The Dolphins had 219 yards of offense against the Browns. They had 248 against the Panthers. They had 276 against the Bills, and they had 211 yards of offense against the Colts. Those are the 4 road games the Dolphins have played this season. They have not surpassed 300 yards of offense in any of them on the road. It's a bad mix. It's a bad mix. And then you compound that with the turnovers, where they had a 4 turnover game on the road in Cleveland. They had a 3 turnover game in Indianapolis. So how do you match up with Atlanta's defense? A lot of misdirection. But the challenge there, again, is Mike McDaniel talked about after this last game, a lot of the miscommunications and the alignment type stuff that Tua talks about, his ability to multitask and get guys lined up and how hard that is. is you've got Julian Hill, prominent starter, out. Darren Waller, your kind of chess piece flex player, is out. Tyreek Hill is obviously out. So how onboarded can you get these guys to get? And those tight ends, again, they are the position room that holds the keys because of how they move around the set and how they're involved in the motions and the shifts and all the things that Mike McDaniel likes to do that this offense is really codependent on. When I went on the set with Teron Armstead, I asked him about that. And he didn't want to say too much, but he did say a lot, these play designs and these concepts are all designed to build off of one another. And if you don't have that ability to have those moving pieces before the snap, it can limit your ability to present multiple challenges to the defense on a play-by-play basis. I don't know how you resolve that unless these guys are really ready to tackle the assignments at hand. Names to know from a pass rusher perspective, I think this is a good week for Patrick Paul. I think this is a bad matchup week for Larry Bourne. The sack leaders in Atlanta, Zach Harrison has 3.5. He's like a big power guy. They've got Leonard Floyd. They've got Jalen Walker. They've got James Pierce. I think any of those guys playing into whether that's Floyd, Walker, or Pierce, I view those guys as guys that I think Walker has the best power out of that player. I don't think Harrison's as explosive as you'd probably want him to be to challenge what Pat has been for you this season. Walker, I don't think, has the length to dictate terms with a guy like Pat, who's as long as he is. And Pierce, I don't think, has the functional strength and power. But those speedy guys against Borum, I think, is a challenging matchup. And then the matchups on the interior, whether that's a backer player like a Caden Ellis, or whether that's a Brandon Dorless or a David Onyemeta or a Rook or Horhorho, who's a young player out of Clemson, who's very twitchy and dynamic and seems to be taking some steps forward. Getting those guys on the inside shoulder of either Patrick Paul or Larry Borum, or playing over top of the guards with what the guard play has been, I think that's where your challenge is. There's a lot of first step quickness there. So what can you do to mitigate that? And do you load up and go 21 personnel and put the backs in the backfield? That was something that JT O'Sullivan touched on when he covered the game against Cleveland is they go empty. And when they went empty, they knew what way the center was turning, and they knew that the guys, the eligibles tight packed to the line of scrimmage were chipping to help on the ends. So they just fired the backside backer away from the passing strength. And because the center's stepping to Myles Garrett, you're getting free runs through the B gap. That's what happened on the interception backed up. That wasn't a bust in protection. They were hot. It was 3rd and long, and they were hot. And Tua has to throw that ball and kind of take the L or try to make something happen and do something reckless with the ball, which is what he chose to do on that play, and he throws a pick. Quarterback has responsibility if they send more than what the protection alignment allows you to do. And that manifested, and I'm not so much worried about that with this matchup, although I will say Raheem Morris, I think, is very capable of coaching up and being out in front, but I think the familiarity for both sides with Morris and obviously his ties to some of these defenses maybe gives Mike a little bit of a leg up in being able to match and anticipate what some of those answers he's going to try to be are. But you got to not do a lot of 7-man or 5-man protections. I don't think you're going to have too much success in this game if you go a lot of empty and do a lot of 5-man protection. So that's what I'm looking for on the offensive side of the ball against this Falcons front that has a lot of speed. Now, college football schedule, we're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins, so make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward for those who don't just believe that it's about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep moving the game forward. This week's moving the game forward moment happened in last night's game between the Chargers and the Vikings. And I'm going to shout out a former Dolphin great's son, Oronde Gadsden II, a player that would probably be pretty helpful for the Dolphins to have right now, who got drafted this year in the 5th round of the NFL draft to the LA Chargers and scored the opening touchdown in the red zone. He's been a monster player for the Chargers this season. His emergence as a receiving threat has just put another layer into that offense. And man, it's going to make that Chargers passing offense even more challenging to stop. And the Dolphins found that out the hard way a few weeks ago when they played the Chargers and Gadsden had strong production. So when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning, even if the unexpected is a 5th round rookie tight end breaking out. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Really happy for Gadsden II, who has turned into a really fun player. It does sting a little bit. I will be honest. It stings a lot to know what the fate was for Jonnu Smith. And it's one thing to say, hey, we have a receiving profile tight end. We maybe need somebody that with a little bit more blocking chops. We're going to go in a different direction. I can get that, and I can respect that. But if it comes at the expense of you then trade Jonnu Smith and he goes in the 5th round, you pick 3 times in the 5th round. And he's a legacy guy, right? It stings a little bit. It's a bit of a bummer. But we'll pick up the pieces and we will move on. I want to talk to you guys about where my eyeballs are going to be in games this weekend in college football as we kind of start to ramp up a little bit some of the scouting conversations around prospects, draft prospects, and kind of get ready for it's going to be a formative offseason in a lot of ways, and who's here and who's not here and who's in charge and what decisions are they making and who are they moving on from and all that kind of stuff. Like we just, that process in April doesn't start in February. It starts in August. And I've been doing some of it behind the scenes, and I want to make sure that I'm giving honest time to the season as it unfolds. But we're kind of at the point where this process, I think it behooves and benefits everybody for it to come to the forefront a little bit more. So games that you should know that are being played in each time slot tomorrow on Saturday. UCLA at Indiana at noon. Indiana's currently ranked number 2 in the country. They've got a few players that you should know, starting first and foremost with Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback who was previously at Cal, but is from South Florida. And his roots are here in South Florida. This is a player that many draftniks perceive to be a top quarterback eligible in this year's class. He's widely expected to be in this year's draft class. I believe he has one more year of eligibility after this year, but he's playing a UCLA team that's kind of gotten hot. Where UCLA, they're 3-4. They started winless. They've won 3 in a row. They beat Penn State. They beat Michigan State. They beat Maryland. So now they're going to Indiana. Indiana, as far as players that you should know that is not the quarterback for a quarterback scouting standpoint, they have Elijah Surratt, 6'2", 210-pound wide receiver, got 9 receiving touchdowns already this season. Very impressive ball skills. So that's a game that I'm watching in the noon slate. I'm also watching Ole Miss at Oklahoma in the noon slate. It's going to be a 2 TV kind of day. But Ole Miss at Oklahoma, the Sooners have a number of prominent prospects. R. Mason Thomas is a pass rusher. They have their own quarterback in John Mateer, who I think is probably trending towards going back to school just based off, he had a hand injury earlier in the year. He missed a game against Kent State. Since he's come back, it hasn't quite looked the same, if you will. So I kind of, it's kind of cooled me on Mateer a little bit, seeing and knowing that there's more variance with his play now. That's kind of cooled me off on him a little bit. But a great matchup and an opportunity for him against Ole Miss. who's ranked number 6 in the country. Those are both in the noon slate with quarterback storylines to watch. 3:30. Everybody and their mother right now is loving on Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson. And I would just say this, you hear Alabama quarterback, you probably lose your mind. But Ty Simpson, first-year starter, right? Stepping into that role, very impressively refined beyond his years from an execution standpoint, that rightfully has garnered a lot of praise and attention. This Alabama team is also not the Nick Saban wagons, right? Like Kalen DeBoer, sure, they've got all the money in the world. Sure, they've got access to a ton of 5-star recruits and a great recruiting profile as a school, but it's not throwing to Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, and Henry Ruggs, right? Like they're not built like that these days. And they're facing a South Carolina team, and they're in South Carolina with Lenora Sellers on the other side at quarterback. It's another marquee, and at least these two are going head-to-head. That's on ABC at 3:30. That will be the big screen with the volume for me in the 3:30 slate, because I'm trying to figure out who Lenora Sellers is. Ty Simpson, I want to know, how legit are you as a one-year starter? And that variance kind of gets scary. But Miami could uniquely be a place that if Tua Tagovailoa is back with the team next year, depending on what decisions are made, and I know there's a lot of guaranteed money that's involved in that, but teams have done that before and moved on, and I don't think that should be off the table for Miami. They might be a uniquely well-equipped place if they're in a position to draft him and they fall in love with him, whoever's making those decisions, to have him in and sit for a year or be initially to start the season as the bridge. Missouri Vanderbilt, Eli Stowers, the tight end for Vanderbilt, kind of has my primary attention in that time slot. You get into the later slate, obviously Canes, they're hosting Stanford. Kind of a disappointing turn for Miami as of late with Carson Beck and the interceptions thrown. So that'll be on a smaller screen for me, but Oregon and Wisconsin, Oregon's loaded. They've got offensive linemen. They've got skill players. They've got a quarterback. They've got defensive linemen. They've got safeties. That Oregon team probably cream of the crop this year as far as draft prospects go, in my mind, as far as who's got the most to work with this year that's going to be eligible for the draft. So that Oregon team is kind of auto on a screen for me. I like Dante Moore, their quarterback. Has some, so I think I see some CJ Stroud-ish tendencies there, but they're not just limited to a quarterback again. And Moore's been productive. He's got 19 passing touchdowns this season, but they've got on defense, they've got Bachter, the linebacker, Thieneman, the safety, could be a top 100 type of player. They've got a number of defensive linemen. Mateo Uiagalelei has 4 sacks this year, has the profile of a 6'4", 260, 265 pound defensive end with a lot of disruption in his game. Isaiah World, the left tackle, is an NFL profile player. They've got a guard whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, but they have a lot. So if you're interested in draft prospects, Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end, turn on some Oregon Ducks at 7:00. They play Wisconsin. And then the last game that I wanted to shout out was the A&M and LSU game. If you listened to Drive Time this week with Travis, you probably heard me on Friday shout this game out, but it's another quarterback opportunity with Garrett Nussmeier, who I really like his game, but I question kind of the ceiling with the tools there. But LSU's got Whit Weeks. They've got Harold Perkins as far as speedy guys that have a lot of range and have some rush ability. Mansour Delane at corner is a really disruptive player. And then Texas A&M's got pass rushers, linebackers. They got wide receivers with KC Conception is the receiver that they have. You think, and he's got 500 yards and 6 touchdowns already this season. He's averaging over 15 yards a catch, so he's a big play kind of guy. Their pass rush is led by Cassius Howell, who has 8 sacks already this season, 6'2", 250, kind of a condensed build type guy, but he gets his hand up, gets some hands on some footballs. The linebacker, Torian York, is a compact guy. He's 5'11", 230, but he can hit. And when you're built small like that, you can hit. So I think all the Dolphins draft process this year generally going to be draft good players, right? Like if you're building foundationally, you're kind of starting from scratch and you have a half dozen to 10 guys that it's like, look, we anticipate these guys are going to be here for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Just take the best players, right? Like, and that's kind of the luxury of starting a build is if you're more blank slate, then it gives you a chance to find value. So it really opens things up to say, hey, I'm not going to go grocery shopping for, I need 2 defensive tackles in the top 100 and we like the class. So we're going to double dip there and draft for need. That's where you get in trouble, right? And that's not to say the Dolphins got in trouble with Jordan Phillips and Kenneth Grant has shown a lot of growth the last 2 weeks. I'm excited to see what that continues to look like. Or Jonas Sinai is not there yet. And but you knew coming in they needed a guard, so they trade up and draft a guard, right? And they lost a pick in the process. That's always the risk that's associated with filling needs in the draft and anticipating those guys are gonna step in. Just take good players, right? Case in point, the Bucks drafted Emeka Egbuka with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin under contract. And they had Jalen McMillan as what looked like a mid-round hit for them last year. Egbuka's been a transcendent player for them. So draft good players. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend. I will talk to you along with Jeff Scanina and Jim Grieshaber on the Squad Show immediately after the game. We go live on YouTube for an hour. That goes over your podcast feed, and then I'll have my own post-game show. So lots to look forward to this weekend, even if you are not necessarily looking forward to the Week 8 matchup against the Falcons. Hope to see you then. Go Fins.